Well, hi everybody. Welcome back to the Wicklow Strength and Fitness Podcast. I apologise for having this up a little bit later than normal. I had a bit of a nightmare coming home from France, not gonna lie. Sitting on the plane on the runway for 2.5 hours before our 2 hour and 20-minute flight was far from ideal, as was the lack of food options when we finally got moving. But do you know what? I had a great time in France, despite the fact that the weather hit a massive 38 degrees. So I managed to miss the really nice weather in Ireland and ended up in heat. That kind of meant like it felt like it was raining outside because you couldn't really make a plan to be outdoors. You had to plan around getting into aircon and things like that. But that was only one day. For the most part, it was just a stunning part of the world for anyone who's ever been to Nice or the south of France, around Cannes and Monaco and things like that as well. It is well worth the trip if you hadn't been. But anyway, that's enough preamble from me. Today, I want to tell you about a conversation I had recently. And it was actually someone telling me about a friend of theirs who'd been training at a gym elsewhere, different county. And they kind of got into a discussion with a trainer who was talking about peptides and taking them. The trainer didn't prescribe them. However, he did speak about like how they'd been beneficial for him, and that is anecdotal at best because these peptides that he was taking were not prescribed to him by a doctor, and they're not regulated. Just one of those kind of, I have a guy, I seen it being talked about on a podcast online from America or whatever. And like this guy bought some, used some, and ended up, pretty unwell. Ended up kind of having to go to hospital. Have to get everything checked out, and the doctors didn't even really know what was going on because they were unaware of what this peptide was. But like everything came okay, and they were all right. They were lucky. But the reason I'm telling you that story is it's probably not a one-off. It's happening more and more and more as in gyms in Ireland, but also, like across the world and everywhere. It's happening at a growing rate because of the growth of these drugs, both in form of GLP-1s that we're going to talk about and in the form of peptides as well. So I suppose that's what we want to touch on is like the difference, right? So I don't want to underemphasize the fact that GLP-1s have changed the game. By every honest measure, GLP-1s have changed what is possible for the right person to achieve that they couldn't do on their own. So the right person in the right circumstances, GLP-1s are amazing. And I've spoken about them before on this podcast. And, a lot of time has passed since I did that episode. And like the results people are getting are still incredible. And two things are going on at the same time. One is genuinely good news for a lot of people, and one is bad news for a lot of people. And the public conversation has kind of merged them into one big sweaty blob of gym people doing drugs. It's like the 80s when people were scared of creatine and things like that. But like that's not what actually is happening. There's a very specific line between them, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about where that line is drawn between GLP-1s and peptides. Like what is the difference and how can you understand it so that when you see something online, you know exactly what is being talked about. So if you're someone who's been considering a GLP-1, this episode is for you. If you're someone who's confused with all the online chatter, this one is for you. Welcome back. It's the Wicklow Strength and Fitness Podcast. It's me, it's Liam. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's just define these terms like quite clearly. Okay, so the public conversation, you're going to hear GLP-1s, you're going to hear peptides, you're going to hear Ozempic, and you'll probably hear performance-enhancing drugs interchangeably. They're not the same. So look, the vocabulary here is a bit of a mess because you'll hear a lot of these mentioned in the same reels, the same quick short form videos. So we're going to go a little bit longer today and hopefully dive a little bit deeper, right? So you have GLP-1 medications, glucagon-like peptide 1 and agonists is their full name. Originally developed for type 2 diabetes, and the brands you would have heard with these are Ozempic, Wegovy, these are both Sigmelitude, and Mounjaro is another one as well. Mounjaro is kind of increasingly being prescribed in Ireland. And these are prescribed by doctors. They're regulated. They have been tested. They are increasingly common for obesity treatment because they've been proven to do amazing things. Peptides is a broader category. Short chains of amino acids that act as a signaling molecule in your body. Some are legitimate prescription medicines. Technically, insulin is a peptide. But some are experimental compounds being sold online and in some gym changing rooms without any form of regulatory approval. And that shit is dangerous. The category of peptide we're concerned about today is the second one. So we're not talking about insulin. We're talking about compounds like BPC 157, TB 500, growth hormone. There's tons, right? And it's like anytime you see one online, they're the ones you're probably going to see, and it's sold as research chemicals. Often it's not fit for human consumption. It's being tested by, it could be being tested on animals, and yet somehow it's being promoted by online influencers and increasingly by some personal trainers, which I find terrible for my industry, for my job, for my coaches' jobs, for the careers of the people I work with and I love. The critical distinction here is that GLP-1s are a regulated prescription drug class with massive clinical trials behind them. The peptides we are worried about are not. They sit in this regulatory grey area where the marketing is wellness, but the legal status is this is not a fit for human use. So anyone telling you that every peptide is a GLP-1 or it's in a similar thing is either confused or they're just hoping they're confusing you. So GLP-1 peptides in the same sentence with a level of confidence, the person saying that is not a doctor. Big news, I know. You can probably picture the person who's saying it, right? So, look, I want to dive into GLP-1s because I don't want to hedge my bets on this. The drugs work, okay? They work and they are brilliant. So I want to say that very, very clearly because not a lot of... It's an interesting thing with gym owners and stuff at the moment and personal trainers is you don't know what to do with GLP-1s. Because there's a lot of doubt about if people can just go onto these drugs, do they still need us? And the answer is, of course they do. They need a plan for afterwards. And, there's a lot of things that go on with that. But I want to say it clearly because it has to come out this way. GLP-1 class of drugs is the most significant intervention in weight management in our lifetime. Possibly ever, actually. The data is not subtle at all. People who could not lose weight for decades are losing, 15 to 20% of their body weight on these drugs. The downstream effects then from that on diabetes risk, cardiovascular risk, joint pain, sleep apnea, fertility, mental health are all real. The medical community is updating its understanding of obesity in real time because of these drugs. And I think the fitness industry has, by and large, maybe reacted to this poorly. They viewed it as a competitor, some with genuine concern because a lot of GLP-1s will threaten the central narrative of the industry as sold for 40 years, that the gap between you and your goals is willpower. However, these drugs make it harder to sell that story because if all it took was you have to come in and you have to, push your body, sweat is fat, crying and all that type of stuff, then how can you account for GLP-1s? But I just want to be quite clear, I'm not the person who ever really said that. I've been about trying to build lifestyle and trying to build stuff that lasts forever. So for me, I think the right person on a GLP-1 with proper medical supervision and a long-term plan is going to live a much better life. Full stop. So who's the right person? Someone who's tried multiple approaches and maybe not succeeded. Someone who's has their BMI in a range where their doctor agrees that this is appropriate. And then someone who has a long-term plan that includes how they're going to maintain the results when they come off the drug. Someone who is going to use the appetite reduction window to build new habits, not just to lose weight, because you will lose the weight. It's the ongoing effect. Are you going to be doing resistance training to look after your bone density? Are you going to use this chance now to build good habits around eating 3 proper meals every day? Things like that. So what is the long-term exit plan? If it means you're using the time on the drug to do the work that makes the time after the drug stick, strength training so that you're not losing muscle along with fat, habits to build new eating patterns, all of that stuff, the drug is the runway. The aircraft is what you can build during it. It's what will actually catapult you into long-lasting health. So the downsides of GLP-1s is like, look, muscle loss is a real risk, especially if you're not doing any kind of physical resistance training alongside of it. Some people can experience, nausea, things like that. And the long-term metabolic effects of being on the drugs long-term or indefinitely are still being studied. So it's not like 100% free, but the honest summary of it, and I can't overemphasize it enough, is GLP-1s are the best tool we've ever had for the right person. They have done incredible things already, and they will continue to do incredible things in the years to come. As long as we have an exit plan, as long as we are maintaining and using that time to build good habits, they are going to change the way we look at obesity forever. And that's pretty damn cool. Okay, so let's look at the other side, okay? The other side is the peptide stuff, and there's a pattern of harm here. So the other side of the line, because the exact moment GLP-1s are getting legitimately better outcomes for legitimate patients, a parallel industry has grown in a lot of gyms. And it's either, it could be a trainer, it could just be something people are seeing online, but it's people who have no medical training advising or sourcing unregulated peptides, sometimes labeled with, research chemicals, not fit for human consumption. And then people who are looking at the results that people get on GLP-1s are looking at, and they want to achieve those same results, and they think that this is going to get them there without having to go to the doctor, or maybe having that somewhat of a stigma attached to it. I don't know, but they're being sold with promises of fat loss, muscle building, joint healing, anti-aging. Take your pick. It's everything out there, right? There's a peptide to solve every single damn problem in the world, apparently. And look, this isn't theoretical. In 2026, Australia has actually now issued a formal safety alert about this. They're reporting severe allergic reactions, full body itching, heart palpitations, blurred vision, injuries, hospitalizations from unapproved peptides being prescribed, for want of a better word, by online trainers, personal trainers. Insane. Australia have called these compounds a safety risk because they have not been evaluated for safety, quality, or effectiveness. The opposite of a GLP-1, which has been tested and has been approved for human use, right? So that's what's going on in Australia right now. But those same products that have been branded a safety risk in Australia are still being used in Ireland, UK, Europe, America, through the exact same channels. The regulatory action is just taking a bit longer to catch up. And that's the case here. I wanted to talk about that because the person who I heard about who ended up in hospital, they were taking a peptide. They ended up, it wasn't prescribed to them by a doctor. It wasn't pharmacy source. It was just through somebody they knew. And they got sick. That should never happen. That's how people used to look at, gyms in the 80s with people taking steroids and stuff like that. That's how people originally looked at. It's how my mom looked at me when I first started taking creatine. But obviously we know creatine is completely 100% tested year over year over year. It's amazing. But the point is, peptides should never have been advised to that person, because when something is classified as not fit for human use, then what the hell are we doing? It's not a GLP-1. It's something entirely different. And look, the line here is not drugs are bad. Okay, there are plenty of good drugs out there. The line that I'm trying to make here is that who has the qualifications, the legal authority, and the accountability to be making decisions about putting substances into your body? A doctor does. A licensed pharmacist does. A registered dietitian within certain amounts of scope does. A online influencer or a personal trainer who saw an opportunity on Telegram or listened to a podcast and thought this sounded cool does not. Ever. And let's be real, okay? Maybe some of these peptides in years to come are proved to be eventually useful and approved for clinical use. Okay, that may happen, and it probably will with some of them. They're probably going to get tested enough that they find some of them are perfectly legitimate for human use. And I have to highlight that as well, because that's the other side of the coin. However, we can't preempt that. We can't be buying things off the back of a truck sold by unqualified people, because there is potentially very severe consequences and very real harm that can be done. So I want to just be kind of clear on that. Is like there may be a time when, like the creatine, like the supplements episode I did, where I talk about how creatine is almost in the essential bucket, protein powders, and all these things that are, tremendously tested and things like that. There may be a time that I'm talking about a certain peptide that right now is not classified safe for human use. But until that time, it is never something I can recommend, especially when there are people getting sick, people suffering from some severe side effects. It is just something I can never do. And why would you not wait for it to be classified as true? If this was the COVID pandemic, if we went back and there was already enough debate about injecting ourselves with what you call it? I've forgotten the word. The injecting ourselves post-COVID to get the antibodies. What's that word? My God, this is great on a podcast. Make sure you have your notes ready, kids. But you know what I mean, right? There was enough debate about whether or not to get vaccinated. That's the word. During that time, with something that was clinically proven, and the debate at the time was, but it was rushed. It was rushed. It was too rushed. And yet some of the same people now I'm seeing prescribing peptides that haven't been tested, that haven't gone through a regulatory approval. So I think we just kind of have to be very clear on that. It's like we have to be careful with what we are putting into our bodies, for sure. And I think that is the line. Like if something is prescribed to you, that's cool. But if it's not, like medicine is prescribed by a doctor, dispensed by a pharmacist, monitored over time, has data behind it, and has accountability built in if something goes wrong. Mischief is sourced by unverified channels, sold by people without medical qualifications, has no regulatory oversight, and has nobody to hold accountable when something goes wrong. And it's just you who pays the price for it. A GLP-1 will be prescribed to you by your GP. You'll be monitored with it. They'll be advising a proper training and nutrition plan. It falls firmly on the medicine line. And again, GLP-1s, revolutionary. A peptide that you're buying off the back of the internet falls firmly on the Mischief side. Even if the trainer is well-meaning, which I'm sure they are, they're probably talking to you from a place of genuine belief. They believe that this has really helped them, so they want to share it with you. And I can highlight and see that is well-meaning, but I still have to call it out that it should never be happening. And the thing about Mischief is it works until it does not. The person it stops working for might be you, and you don't want to end up in hospital being that guy. So listen, if you are considering a GLP-1, talk to your GP. You can come talk to me, but all I'm going to talk to you about is, go talk to your GP, and let's talk about making sure your training plan properly suits that. Let's talk about how to manage your nutrition when you're working on that. Like, that's the entire scope, because like the GP is going to monitor everything, and my job as your trainer is just to support what your doctor is doing with proper resistance training and nutrition guidance. That's the entire scope that I can do, right? So if you're in another gym, or if you see something online or anything like that, and someone offers you a peptide or something they think works, and it's an injection, or it's even if it's viral, just walk away. Not ask more questions, just walk away. There is no version of my personal trainer sells me prescription medication. That should never, ever happen. That never ends well, whether it was back in the 80s with the steroids days or whether it's now with this. Even if it's technically a peptide and not a controlled substance, even if they're a friend that's offering it to you, if there's people who've had no issues, the legal and health risks are just not worth it. So if you're already on a GLP-1, find a coach that understands. That's all I can say, because we will definitely be there to help you manage the resistance training and the process alongside it. So look, quick recap before we wrap up today. GLP-1s are a real medicine. They're prescribed by real doctors with real evidence behind them. For the right person with the right plan, they're the greatest tool we've had for sustainable weight loss in my lifetime, maybe your lifetime, maybe the entire history of mankind. Peptides sold by trainers in gym back rooms or off the back of the internet are something else entirely. Unregulated, unsupervised, and in some cases, they're actively dangerous. The Australians have formally warned us about them this year. The line between the two is not about substance. It is about who is making the decision and who is accountable when it goes wrong. I hope I've managed to put a line in the sand for you. That was the goal for today, because again, I see it all the time. I see quick little 60-second content that blurs the lines, and I really wanted to just try and clear that up for you today. I want this podcast to be a place where someone can get an honest answer from a coach who's not trying to sell you anything. But the honest line is, if a doctor and a thoughtful coach are involved, you're probably fine. If a trainer is the only person involved, no matter how thoughtful they are, you're probably not going to be. Make sure that this stuff is fully checked out and fully approved for you. All right, that's it from me today, gang. Thank you for tuning in to the WSF podcast once again. If you're a member here, I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not a member here, I hope you enjoyed it too. If you want to become a member, click the link in the show notes. Train hard, my friends. Stay skeptical when you see things on the internet, and I'll see you next week.